name is Anand Gupta. Presently, I am the Honorary General Secretary of Builders Association of India. I am also be honored as a Vice President of Remaking of Mumbai Federation. I myself is a developer and contractor. We are having another speaker who has come all the way from London, Mr. Andrew Tindsley. He is a town planner and urban designer. Let me also tell you, he is quite acquainted with the Bombay and the Indian system, as he himself is having his own office and the system running in India. And he is going to highlight how once the place, people change the place and the location and how those are being sorted out. His live experiences which he has seen in the different part of the country and different part of the world.
Good morning, everybody. How does one start a presentation when your previous co-speaker has finished with the words that, well, God made most things and then developers came along and did the rest, which is from my perspective a pretty sort of scary place to be in the world. But we'll move. We'll move forward from there and see what happens. I think I'm a relatively late invitee to attend this conference, and it came about because I met Mayank only in December time, wasn't it? And we were having one of those 5-minute conversations that you have at an exhibition, and our 5-minute conversation turned out to be a 3-hour discussion that went on through the course of an afternoon. And I returned to London and then received an invitation from this organisation here to say, would you like to come along and say a few words? So I'm here rather nervously. I'm a Britisher, which was mentioned this morning. I'm not sure, and I can't make any bones about that. But Anthony stood on the stage earlier, and he comes from Manchester originally, be it that he's got a slightly Chicago accent. And I come from even farther north in the UK, and I come from Preston. So not only have you got Britishers, but you've got Lancastrians that are amongst you. And what may you say have we got to offer? Well, I'm sure we haven't got all the solutions, and we can't give you, well, this is how we've done it, and this is what we think you should do. And all I can do is to say that I'm delighted, I'm honoured, I'm very pleased to be here just to contribute to what is a fascinating debate. I have a little, and only a little experience of India. I started to come here almost 3 years ago. And in that period of time, I've probably been here every month, every 5 weeks. And it's one of those places that when you're here, it's dreadfully frustrating and you wonder how you're going to get anything done. And when I've left and I get back to the UK, I just go, what a great place. When can I get back on the plane and come here? To the extent that a short while ago, we opened our first studio here, which is a combination of some of my colleagues and some great people that we found in India that are working alongside us. So in terms of urban regeneration, I think we're trying to fuse those things together, the spirit of the place and a little bit of knowledge and expertise that we might have got from elsewhere. So what's all this business about time, place and identity? Well really it's just our view on life and what we think the issues are that you need to consider. It's a complicated process, is urban development, urban regeneration. It's something where constantly you need to be looking over your shoulder to see what your predecessors have done, what history tells us might work and quite clearly in many instances doesn't work at all, and then having a great vision so that you can see just what the future may hold for you and to take the best of what that is and then to really move that on. I think there are a number of points that really spin off some of the discussions that have already taken place this morning. As designers and developers, primarily we need to listen and we need to engage, because we need to understand what those issues are. We need to have our antennae twitching so that we get the reactions, we seek what people's views are to the solutions that we're promoting. And people have hopes and aspirations, and when God's done his thing and the developers are doing their thing, hopefully you can get hold of those hopes and aspirations, and they get molded into this process that we're dealing with. And then when we've done that, we've got history and context, and they draw this fantastic timeline that moves through. And we've already heard that there's thousands of years of development that have taken place in India already. But how do we get that? And then we replot this trajectory that takes us forward for, not for 5 years or 10 years or 50 years, but, you know, another couple of centuries, that we create something which is enduring and is wholly sustainable. And then within all communities, there is always a range of dynamic elements that are taking place. How can we capture these? How can we channel these? And how can we use them to create a direction and an opportunity for those people which are going to be part of the developments or the existing communities that we're dealing with? From a personal perspective, my and my colleagues' ambition is to be creators of places rather than creators of iconic buildings. We think that is vital to the philosophy that we have. And in doing that, there are really probably 4 Ds. So discovering, defining, determining, and developing. And it's all about putting those 4 Ds together to create this identity of a place. We've heard a lot of this morning about South Mumbai. We're going to hear more about it in a few minutes' time, I'm sure. And there's a uniqueness and an authenticity. It might be poor, it might be falling to pieces in places, but it is real and it is from that part of the world. And I think Anthony's opening comments about what we mustn't do is this global oneness that we transfer from one location to another location. We have to create this unique identity. It's very precious, and we have to hang on to it for everything that we have. Mayank, you'll recognise 1 or 2 of the characters that are sitting in the pictures here. One of my own colleagues was actually on your territory only a few weeks ago, just trying to make sure that whilst I'm not going to talk about Seaward, that at least we understood what a few of the issues were. As part of the development process, it's all about change. Change happens. Things move forward, whether it's changes in population movement. Here you've got this fantastic inward migration of people from all over India that are coming here. Whether it's new infrastructure that's going to drive people from one location to another location. Whether it's new technology that will help you live in a different sort of place. Change will happen. And it's probably to these people that you see in a photograph like that process is going to affect their everyday lives. So at the top of the agenda is, what are those changes going to do? And how can we, as designers, developers, people that are associated with the urban development world, how can we make a contribution to that process? Now, again, this is a conference about tall buildings, and I may be shot down at all sorts of points because I'm not particularly an expert on tall buildings. But in this process of change, lots of things that can happen can be small in scale, they can be incremental, they can not be benign, but as in Mumbai and the big metro cities, they can be dramatic, and not everything goes according to plan, and sometimes the effects that you get through that change process can be slightly less than harmonious. And this is where we just refer back a little bit to some of our own experience. Now, in the UK, like India, we had whole areas of our Victorian cities were full of development which was low in quality and it was poor. And we had great plans as to how we were going to redevelop it, and thousands of residential units. And I'll use those terms, which are quite statistical. Thousands of residential units were removed, but actually in those thousands of residential units, you had hundreds and hundreds of families. And those hundreds and hundreds of families came together and they made communities. And those communities had a heart and they had a sense of place. Now, we had a vision at that time, and in this great vision, we lost a lot of what we had gained within these tightly knit communities. And the difficulty was that in a period of less than 40 years, we then realized that it really wasn't working out terribly well. And that particular vision, which was strong, it was driven through, it was done in a very short period of time, but it clearly failed. And whilst architects like to get back to the drawing board, I think we got back to the drawing board a lot quicker than we could ever imagined. Now, the reality is that we in the West and you here have not lost our appetite for urban development. And we can do it big and we can do it dense, but the reality is that we've had to think really hard about the process that we go through to make sure that we try and get some of the fundamental factors that we're dealing with a little better than we started with. And to use a few of my earlier words, our approach is really not about buildings, but it's one which looks at the issues of community, of the environment, of the social factors that are at play, of society, and one of time. Now, having got the development world around me, time is always the thing that nobody has. You know, it's now. And yes, we can build it really quickly, and suddenly we might find that we've built one or two things a little quicker than we thought, and we might rue that moment and wish that we'd spent maybe just another few weeks thinking about what the issues would be. So we do need time to design, we do need time to plan, we do need time to get the construction process in place, but we also need time to explore, to think about it. You cannot put that process off the program. We need time to learn about what the issues are. And then on that little slide there are these words about ownership and belonging. We may be on a greenfield site, but we still have to try to put those ingredients together that give it a quality above bricks, concrete, cement, and steel. From my own perspective, I'm a passionate urbanist, which is all about putting urban development together. And in doing that, we're looking at physical characteristics, we're looking at the activities which take place within a location, we're looking at the emotional and the spiritual ideals which might be inherent in that place. And then there's always a memory. And what are our experiences? We've all got places that we're familiar with, that something sits in the back of our mind, and it's a great place to be, or this is a great place to work, or it's a great place to live, or I visited there once and it sticks with you forever. How can we keep doing that? And can we ask ourselves, when we put development together, that it answers all or any of those particular questions? And when we've built these places, be it the wonderful developments that the students had created from Chicago and from Mumbai a year ago, whether it's something like that or it's a very shiny set of new buildings that have come from one of our architectural colleagues that have produced that solution. And it's about the buildings and it's about the spaces and it's about the model of development that we create, but it's actually how that enables people to react with that space, and it's that reaction and it's their exchange with that space and that place and that location that will ultimately decide whether that is going to be a success. So I've got two short case studies, which I think are worthy of just a few minutes as I move rapidly through my presentation. And I make no bones about that these are back in the UK, but they're both born out of the mid-1990s at a time when we had to put our thinking caps on again and start to review the process about how we were putting development together. Because we had a similar model, that we had industrial buildings, business had gone away, we wanted new housing, there was a real demand for social housing, for mid-range housing, for high-end housing, and we lost a lot of our heritage. And then we started to sort of sit back and say, well, we can brush it all away, we can build tall, we can build quick, and it doesn't quite address the problems. This little factory site sits in Leeds, which is in the north of England, and for the sustainability experts, Leeds in the UK has absolutely nothing to do with LEED and the sustainability world, although hopefully it's the sustainable place that we've created. But Holbeck was the cradle of the Industrial Revolution. One of the foundries on the site made manufacturing equipment for textiles, and I'm pretty sure that as we sit in Mumbai, lots of the businesses that had textile manufacturing, they got their kit from this particular organisation. You could have come in and torn this place apart, but we worked with a public and a private organisation, so even then it wasn't the PPP model or the PFI model, but the public sector was deeply involved in this initiative. And we looked at what do we need to knock down, What can we keep? What can we reuse? What can we take down and rebuild because it's actually a piece of our history and we can give it a new life? And what are the new things that we can sensitively put into that particular location? We went through a process of consultation and engagement, though in that location we only had a very small residential community to talk to. But those that were there, the businesses that were there, the stakeholders that were there, the people on the outside of that particular development were there. There was a good exchange. And I think that's a mark that we have on all of our work now, is to communicate where it's remotely possible. And in this wonderful age that we're all in now with telephones and computers and Twitter and Facebook, and there's 1,000 ways in which you can communicate with your colleagues. The next thing is to set a vision and have something which is appealing and gets everybody's imagination going, and then you develop a solution. Now, compared with the problems that you've got in Mumbai, this particular piece of work is relatively modest, but what it has done is re-establish a whole part of a city centre that had faded, that had died. It's now reconnected to the very core of that city and is a thriving community where people live there, they work there, and they enjoy their leisure time there. So I think there are lessons to take out of that. And then if we were to move 40 miles to the west, we come to one of the UK's famous waterfront cities, which has lots in common with Mumbai, and this is the city of Liverpool. Now, the city of Liverpool has been in business as a trading port for many centuries, and in the early part of the 19th century, it created its first enclosed port, and it had an urban development around the outside of it, which is now called rope walks. And in this particular area, the merchants moved in with their fine houses, and they had small warehouses. And then trade got better, so the merchants moved out a little bit further, and their houses got turned into houses for labourers, and more warehouses moved in. And it had 150 years of great wealth, great prosperity, very successful. But by the 1990s, it had died on its feet. People were rapidly moving away, businesses were going, and there was an opportunity to start to review it. And something called the Rope Walks Partnership, and again, driven by the public sector, but with the strong influence of the private sector, the Rope Walks Partnership kicked off. And what they wanted to do was to completely review how this very, very old quarter of the city worked. We were very lucky that we were appointed, in the first instance, as urban planners. Our first move was to take a little shop in the area, above a very strange music shop in a back street, not a very auspicious location at all. But from that place, we started to get to know the people, the climate. If you've ever been to the Merseyside, you know that it rains a lot and the people really don't bother about the rain, as you can see in the little picture here. And we got to get a real feeling of what this place was all about, including its crumbling buildings, many of which are now rescued and are part of a UNESCO World Heritage Site. We produced diagrams, we drew nice sketches, we had lots of meetings, and we discussed what might be with those particular individuals that were living there. We explored all of the opportunities that were available. We were very lucky that the local planning authority were vigorous in their approach, they were very forward-thinking, and they were prepared to look at all sorts of ideas. So the public sector and the private sector really came together very quickly. And there was this successful partnership, and partnership runs through everything that I think we've been talking about today. And the planning authority set a flexible but robust planning strategy. Now, I'm not going to go through all of the things that we did there, but the two headlines there, we were setting best practice. So what are the real sort of high standards that we can start to achieve in here? And this place is really special. So let's understand what the characteristics are, and let's work with ideas that keep all of those. We set a series of design principles. We were looking at the mixture of uses. All of those things that we've seen in the big tall towers, we probably had a lower threshold to deal with, so we weren't exploring 20 stories, 30 stories, 40 stories, but we were certainly exploring 8 stories, 9 stories, 10 stories, which in a city of the scale of Liverpool was quite tall. And the other important part of that process was something called an integrated action plan. It's planner speak, But the reality is that 3 streams of work came out of that particular action plan. And the most important was a business support and training program. And the business support and training program was targeted at the people that lived in that area. So it wasn't a case of new people bringing new money in, doing new development, but there was an opportunity for people that lived in that location to be trained with the new businesses that were moving in so that they could afford to live there and they could afford to work there. The message that comes through is that the way this particular project moved forward was successful. It rebuilt the spirit of a community. It gave confidence back to that particular location. And from that, the private sector then moved in an even more significant manner. And there's a project which is now referred to as Liverpool One, which was completed 2 years ago and has actually introduced almost £1 billion of investment into that particular part of the city. The little circles on the diagram show how closely related those 2 areas are. But they've built and they've fed off each other's success. And the same process of development has gone through. That it's been one of consultation, it's been one of engagement, it's been one of coming up with strong concepts, it's been testing those concepts, it's been producing models and drawings and letting the world see what those ideas are. So there was a huge studio, a huge shop. People could come in, they could explore, they could test, they could challenge. And they wouldn't necessarily be able to change the fundamentals of how that development was actually going to occur. But in small ways, they could start to bring about change and they could start to have ownership of it and feel that it was part of their city and it was part of what they were going to do. So those individuals, the city, the private sector developers, the contractors, the designers, 20 or 30 different bodies came together on a regular basis. They saw it move from nice diagrams on a piece of paper, nice cardboard models, and they saw it rapidly translate into tower cranes on the site. Lots of development, lots of inconvenience. It wasn't always the perfect place to be for about 5 years. But suddenly you get new development that occurs. It's very dense. There's 2.5 million square feet on a relatively small footprint. And it has a place to shop, a place to work, a place to live. And more importantly, when you've done all of those things, there's a nice place that you can go outside and you can chill out and you can enjoy the environment. Mayank, you talked about how you use the ground plane and how you take maximum advantage. This beautiful green space that we've just created pays for itself because it's got 2,800 car spaces that are just tucked underneath it. So you can try to have the best of both worlds if you have the developers that are interested in being imaginative and you have a planning authority that's prepared to be flexible in the way that it can interpret the rules and regulations. I started by talking about history, heritage, the way you look back and the way you look forward. The site of the old dock, which was the reason why rope walks turned up in the first place, that was long gone. It was filled in and disappeared. But we know where the location is, and the location's marked. So the image on the left-hand side shows where the original ships were, and the image on the right-hand side is an abstract version of what happened there. But at least there's a memory that at one time there was a place where there was water, there was activity, and that was why you had a particular development in a particular location. It's changed dramatically, but it's important that this little thread of activity has continued right through to the present day. Now, everything I've said, you can try to build into some sort of flowchart of activity. And again, I'm not going to go through all the issues that sit in that flowchart of activity, which are the technical ways in which you can go through this process of master planning. But what's important is that, from our perspective, all of those things need to be addressed before a developer, an architect, gets hold of the brief for a particular project and starts to design an individual building. And as well as looking at all of those real hard issues, there are always a lot of soft things that we should be looking at as well. So when we are putting a project together, we should be asking ourselves simple things. Is the market close by? Is there a bus stop that we can get easy access to work? Does it feel safe? Does it feel secure? Is it a place that we'd like to be? Every location will have a different set of those little words that sit on that diagram. But it's worth putting those out and scribbling those out at the start of a project, whether you've got a very tall building or a very low-rise building, to see, have we got the right ingredients that are going to give us the right place? And finally, there are just a series of words that we really try to introduce into a project at the end of the exercise. And it's all about quality and it's all about imagination. But if you live there, does it feel like a great place to be? Do you feel comfortable? Has it got a lively environment? And most of all, are you there and you have a sense of belonging and you feel that it's my place to be? Thank you very much. Thank you.